So, hello, everybody. Good evening. Um, Again, questions or comments, I'm open to suggestions. This is just to kind of orient you to my perspective on working in quantum based on where I sit. As Tanner mentioned, I host a podcast, a Quantum Tech Pod, where I've interviewed about 59 C-suite execs at various leading quantum companies, a few scientists as well. Bob Kuke, you may know that name. But I want to give you begin with some sort of socio-historical perspective, because I think it's always good to, when thinking about work, right, to have perspective on how we got to now, if you will, which, by the way, is a great book by Stephen Johnson, sidebar plug. Uh, Humans have always been exploring technologies to make work easier, to make them easier solving, make them solve problems faster, simpler, make life better, if you will. Right. So whether it's wandering around in the Pleistocene wilderness tens of thousands of years ago, where the technology in this case was like a long stick with a sharp end, trying to kill something larger than you that you could eat and use to make clothing, to modern settings where you have like robots working in a warehouse. Again, the through line is technology, and it's everything from fire to horseshoes to locomotives, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. The implications certainly for what we call business and more broadly careers, jobs, what you do for a living, right? Ties to technology has been morphing and changing for literally tens of thousands of years. So do we have any historians in the audience? Raise your hands. I can't see your hands, but raise your hands. Maybe Tanner can see them.
We have one hand with like a maybe.
Oh,
A lot of us
okay.
are EE, computer science,
Yeah.
so physics, mathematicians.
Yeah. I think maybe someone has an interest in sort of history, writ large, economics, that kind of thing. But again, this won't be on the test, but it's my sort of pop quiz. I want to ask if anyone has an idea who said this quote, who delivered this quote, what they said it about, and when they said it. So if there are any ideas, the person who raised their hand tentatively, any sense of where this might have come from? And again, this is not to bust you, but just to kind of get you thinking, right? From socio-historical perspective. So the first tip off is subjects, right? I refuse to issue a patent for fear it will put my poor subjects out of work. So it's some kind of monarch. So we have monarchs today, but monarchs are probably more prevalent, certainly in the 18th century. So anyway, the person who said this was this lady, Queen Elizabeth I, not the second, the first one. And she said it about a mechanized knitting machine. She was terrified that it was going to deliver a technology that people wouldn't understand or know how to apply. So this is an image of the mechanized knitting machine that terrified her subjects. And she said it in 1589. So 400 odd years ago, 430 years ago, people were questioning the validity of the value that new technologies might apply to how people lived and worked. And people might say that today about ChatGPT or about X or LinkedIn or robots or whatever. So just keep that in mind as we go through this, right? These are conversations that have been going on for a long time. And we've come through it with flying colors. I mean, technologies tend to lift all boats to a meta degree, right? New technologies. So that's Queen Elizabeth. If you're interested in this kind of thing, if you're maybe like a amateur economic historian, there's a great book by a woman named Carlota Perez. She's a Venezuelan economist. She teaches at Cambridge. The book is called Technological Revolutions in Financial Capital. She breaks the past 350 years down into 5 cycles of innovation, some kind of crash or sublimation, and then assimilation, standardization. And starting with the Industrial Revolution, the example I cited around knitting machines that were working in factories and moving people out of home environments into factories. So it's a cool book. Again, I won't belabor it, but you might make a note if you're interested in sort of seeing this kind of thinking around tech and business, and by implication, again, careers. Okay. I have 5 points I want to share with you, starting with this quote by Stephanie Simmons. She's a quantum native, she would say. She's been a quantum nerd since she was like 10 years old. She was a guest on my recent podcast. She's the chief quantum officer at Photonic. They're a silicon spin quantum computing company based in Vancouver. Her take is, all human progress has been driven by the commercialization of physics. So certainly in terms of our quantum conversation today, that is true, right? I mean, taking physics, the aspects of physics that are all around us and applying them in ways that deliver value, make work easier, make our lives better, right? As per my earlier quote, physics with throwing a spear, it's physics, right? Um, Building a robot, it's physics. So that's the first point. Second point is we have no idea what these technologies are going to deliver. This is a screenshot of a early integrated circuit from Intel, 1971. I love this quote. It's from their business plan, right? They put together a business plan trying to get funding, build this company in the early 70s. In their business plan, they called out the fact that it's anticipated that many of these customers will be located outside California. Like, can you imagine that as a perspective? Like, and now it's everywhere in everything, right? So again, keep that in mind in terms of quantum. We really don't know. We have ideas for sure and lessons from the past like this quote from Intel, but which makes it exciting and again translates to job and career opportunities. Third, quantum is vertical agnostic. It doesn't care what business you're in, what company you work at. If you work at a nonprofit, at a foundation, an NGO, in a government role, at a private sector company, it's going to impact how you do your business no matter what. So keep that in mind. Again, every company at some point is going to be dealing with this. The idea is every company is a technology company today, whether they like it or not. If they try to avoid it, that's a going out of business strategy, plain and simple, right? And quantum is going to be in this space. This is a chart I'm going to get into more detail about later, but the idea is the quantum workforce is evolving and requires lots of people with lots of different skills. It's not just physicists and scientists, with all due respect, right? And you may start out with that kind of training and orientation, but there are lots of different roles you could play in the broader ecosystem. These are companies at the end of the day, so they need the skills that all companies need. And I'm going to drill down into this later in the talk. And then my final point is the importance of community, of networking, of building out your contacts. This is a photo I took at the National Physical Laboratory in London. I was there a few weeks ago. I gave a talk and moderated a half-day session at Quantum Tech in London. But it's an aphorism that's oft described as showbiz, but it's true today in every business, which is it's not what you know, it's who you know. So I encourage you to think in terms of building your network, making it a routine, making it a job. We'll talk about that a little more later. My admonition to students is certainly create a LinkedIn profile and then try to add 5 people a week to your profile. If you get to Friday at 5 o'clock, like tomorrow at 5, and you haven't added 5 people, stop what you're doing, put down the Game Boy, turn off Netflix, log out of Amazon, stop trying to steal something on eBay, and put some Boolean parameters into LinkedIn. Google plus Quantum plus San Diego or whatever, and see what pops up. And find 5 people, and ideally with director or above titles, meaning they have discretion, they have headcount, they have FTP, full-time, positions. So those are the 5 starting points. Let's talk about quantum supremacy for a moment. So this is sort of the holy grail, if you will, and gets a lot of press. Some of you may be aware of this, right? Google's Sycamore superconducting quantum computer ostensibly, solved what some people describe as a toy problem. But anyway, they did it in 200 seconds and contend that it would have taken a classical computer 10,000 years to complete this kind of problem. So implications for how you capture and manipulate and rationalize data are huge, needless to say. I think we're currently looking to achieve quantum utility. That's more the language that businesses are talking about today. We're ultimately moving to quantum advantage, where there's a clear differentiation between solving problems with a classical computer and then using quantum to help, if you will, certainly in HPC settings and data centers, server farms. But so that's just sort of context, right? Evolution of computers, we're in the quantum states. Again, I won't bore you with too much of this. There's a lot of this kind of detail you can look up. You can Google it. It's on Wikipedia. Mechanical devices, beginning with Charles Babbage's difference engine, a physical device that could add and subtract that he designed in like 1829. Then the invention of vacuum tubes led to ENIAC, the first sort of electronic computer designed to map ballistic trajectories. It took up an entire room at University of Pennsylvania. Then transistors and integrated circuits in the 50s, and which are everywhere now, right? In our pockets, on our wrists. And quantum is kind of where we are. That's the transition into the next sort of phase, if you will. Some of you may know Bob Suter. If you don't know him, you should connect with him. You should at least follow him. You should follow his company, Inflection. He's a former IBMer. He's a friend of mine. I actually was just visiting with him yesterday in New York. He was at this IQT event. But his contention is many industries are currently working with quantum computing, including banking, capital markets, insurance, automotive, aerospace, energy. The implication being, in years to come, the breadth and depth of the industries leveraging quantum will continue to grow. So this is kind of a no-brainer, but it's, again, something to log for all of you. This is going to, again, affect every business, vertical agnostic, as I said before. Right? Let's talk. So there are 4 key focus areas, and I don't want to take the time to drill down into each of them. I just want to point them out to you. So quantum computing is a quantum-based solution that gets a lot of the press. It gets the limelight. It's the darling of the media, if you will. I think because, the potential, as I see, the quantum supremacy contention is pretty frighteningly powerful, and implications are broad. Sensors is more realistic today. There are companies, particularly in the medical field and in working in GPS denied environments, like developing sensors to be used in submarines or in mines or places where you can't get to GPS data. There's a company developing a 3D printable wearable quantum sensor sort of helmet, if you will, to detect childhood epilepsy. Pretty cool company in England. Networks, big focus for sure. How do you send data immutably, safely, quickly, using existing fiber and photons? And then cybersecurity, a lot of focus on both QKD, which is kind of a near-term solution, quantum key distribution, and then post-quantum encryption, post-quantum cryptography, which is software-based. And there are a lot of companies making money and looking for people now working in cybersecurity. For one reason is that a lot of governments, needless to say, are very apprehensive about the harvest now, decrypt later threat, right? That there are hackers and non-state actors and adversarial countries that are even now, stealing data and parking it somewhere till a quantum computer can crack Shor's algorithm, and then they'll use it for ransomware, or they'll sell it to competitors or whatever. So again, 4 key areas to keep in mind at a meta level. Why is quantum so cool? Just the computing part, right? So there are 2 sets of problems. Ones we solve every day. Calculations are challenging, but we can solve them in a reasonable amount of time. Then problems that are so hard, we don't even really bother talking about solving them. We're thinking about them, right? In computational mathematics, this is called NP-hard. Some of you may be familiar with this, non-deterministic polynomial time hardness. Things that are just, we don't have the ability to capture enough data and manipulate it to solve these kinds of problems. Now, that said, quantum computers, in theory, have the ability to solve those kinds of problems. The traveling salesman problem is one of the most studied optimization problems. Again, has applications across a range of settings: logistics, manufacturing, transportation. The idea is to find the optimal route connecting, in this case, 15 cities, which translates to like 43 billion options. As soon as you add 5 more cities, bring it to 20 cities, it's 121 quintillion options. But in theory, a quantum computer could make sense of this because it can do, simultaneous calculation to come up with the best route. And again, broadly applying this optimization solution has, big implications for the 3 areas mentioned on the slide, as well as others. Drug discovery, drug development takes like 10 years and $2 billion historically to bring a drug to market. But imagine with the power of quantum computing, could maybe find cures for cancer, genetic diseases, Alzheimer's, a vaccine for the next pandemic. I did a great panel in New York with Shahar Kynan. If you're interested in this kind of thing, there's a company called Polaris QB. And she runs this company that uses D-Wave's annealing computer to make selections around molecules that can be used in drug development to treat diseases. And she's doing it today. It's happening now. She's working with a couple of partners. And a main focus for her is on women's diseases, so endometriosis and similar kind of issues that affect women's health. Finance, there's a lot of focus in finance on using quantum for portfolio optimization, for fraud detection, investment strategies, running complex Monte Carlo simulations. I remember hearing Will Zhang when he ran the quantum research practice area at Goldman Sachs. He opened a talk on a webinar with this. He said, "Hi, I'm Will Zhang. I'm from Goldman Sachs. I have a checkbook. Bring me something." It's like, yeah, we're a big, well-funded investment bank. You got something that my clients are interested in investing and or that will help us run the business more efficiently. He's now been poached, actually. He's now at Quantination, which is one of the largest seminal VC venture capital investment firms in quantum. Communication, lots of companies, QNect in New York, Cubitech in Chattanooga, Tennessee. This is a animated GIF from the Chicago Quantum Exchange, building mutable networks to protect data and move it around quickly. Certainly finance, healthcare, legal, military secrets, lots of applications. So that's happening. Interesting area to work in. This is probably my favorite. This is from a chart that a consultant at Accenture delivered at one of our IQT events, but predicting the weather. So you can predict the weather today with about 85% accuracy, 3 to 5 days out. You can predict it with a 60% accuracy, maybe 10 days out. But his contention was, imagine if you could predict the weather for, 100 years. Like, what would that mean for agriculture, transportation, environment? My sort of explanation of this is, you guys heard of LL Bean, right? It's a company in Maine that makes like outdoor gear, or REI or whatever. So LL Bean, their strategy guy, comes to the planning session and says, so according to our quantum computing calculations, the winter of 2038 is going to be really cold. So I think we should ramp up production of those red reindeer sweaters that everybody really likes. Implications for manufacturing, supply chain, trucking, logistics. Anyway, I mean, certainly there are a lot of stochastic variables that would make this challenging, but this is kind of a fun thought experiment to think about what you could do if you could predict the weather for that far in advance, right? So how can you contribute? Let's talk about those of you in the audience, right? What kind of role might you play? I put this slide together to kind of show examples of how technology moves out of the lab and into the mainstream, into real world applications. So these are screenshots of ads. Many of these companies don't exist anymore, right? I mean, anybody heard of a Royal McBee computer? Probably not. And the price points as well that change as these kind of technologies get more efficient, more powerful. Imagine paying $3,398 for a 10 megabyte hard disk. I mean, now you get like what I think you could probably buy like a 5 terabyte flash drive for probably $80 or something, right? But the idea is technologies, in this case, computers, and the printers and whatever related to quantum, are all going to need to follow this path, if you will, and move into the mainstream to be adopted and used and applied and deliver value in business settings, right? Make sense? Some of these pictures are wild, right? Isaac Asimov pitching Radio Shack, contending that Thomas Jefferson would have made better decisions in 1776 with an Apple computer. It's a little presumptuous, I'd say.
Chris, I think this slide really speaks to how we cannot predict how quickly our technology will develop. Like you said, we're sort of on the beginning of this emerging technology where its true power is starting to be harnessed. And if you look back to the 60s and told people that they would have computers in their pocket with hundreds of times more processing power than the best IBM mainframes, for example, people wouldn't believe it. They would think you're crazy. But if we look at the progress in the industry, even within the last 5 years, we're already starting to see that exponential growth of computing power within these machines.
Yeah, no, for sure. Absolutely. And I think the key sort of screen grab on this page probably is the one in the upper left, which is saying this gentleman is an executive on some level, where he's got a tie on, works at Microsoft. He's saying, multi-plan allows me to explore more alternatives in less time. I think it leads to better management decisions. So again, the meta message is it delivers business value. It helps him do his job better. It helps the company make money. It helps the company be more efficient and productive. And that's always the driver. And that's in the case of quantum, it's the same. It hasn't changed. Those are the objectives. You know, they're not doing it for fun. I mean, McPaint was a cool program, but companies and investors and shareholders are looking to support technologies that drive business value and make our lives better and make what we do more effective, right? Make sense? So let's talk about this slide. This is sort of the money slide, if you will, to me. The workforce around quantum is evolving and requires people with lots of different and adjacent ancillary skills, right? So I'm just going to kind of go through this. Certainly scientists and researchers at the core. Many of these companies have C-suite execs that have been pulled from other tech companies. You know, they might have worked at Intel or IBM or whatever, and are now leading quantum companies, right? In the upper right, you need sales, you need business development, you need somebody to go to a client who's got a checkbook and convince them that it's going to deliver value. Back to that picture of the Microsoft multi-plan guy, right? You need UX design. How do you touch this stuff and interact with it? People who are familiar with human-computer interface protocols, right? I used to work at IBM with these PhDs in cognitive psychology that were helping us advise web design parameters. I mean, a lot of these, you know, it's the hardware companies certainly have boxes. They have cryostats, they have wiring, they have dill fridges. How do you touch them and interact with them to make them easy to use? Education, the profession that enables all other professions, right? Putting together courseware. Some examples of universities where this exists. You need people who are interested in having regulatory and policy conversations, right? Talk to governments about how do we regulate and manage this technology. Optics, wiring, and photonics. I describe this as sort of the picks and shovels of the quantum business. Companies that do very well building, again, dill fridges and wiring harnesses and lasers and test benches that make this kind of research and advancement possible. You need people in comms and PR. People have to write about this to make it understandable, so the general public and or investors or students or potential employees can understand it. Marketing and branding. A lot of people moving from traditional kind of tech marketing roles at general advertising agencies are getting hired and poached by quantum companies because they know how to talk tech and they know how to talk to consumers and make pieces of writing that are understandable and consumable. So that's a big job. Investing. So all the big banks are exploring quantum. They all have practice areas. And then strategy consulting. We used to call this sort of the tip of the arrow, right? Where consultants at companies like McKinsey, Accenture, EY, BCG go to clients who say, well, how is this going to impact my 5-year plan? Where do I need to spend? What should I avoid? What's the near-term opportunity? How long will I have to wait to see ROI? So anyway, the message of this chart, right, is there are lots of ways to get involved. And the other implication is you may start in one of these boxes and move to another one. You may start as a scientist and discover you really like talking to clients about the business value and get into a biz dev role. Or you may decide you want to work in a more program management kind of capacity, say in a picks and shovels, test bed kind of environment. There's lots and lots of ways to get involved, right? And this is not comprehensive, but it's just a view of the landscape. Who's out there doing stuff in quantum? Enabling technologies, certainly people building hardware, software, consulting companies, cybersecurity and networking, and then more vertical specific applications, chemicals, materials, and biotech on the right. Lots of companies doing that. And then, companies providing the actual sort of basis for this kind of work. So, companies exploring different qubit modalities. As you know, there are probably 6 or 7 going on. There are ones that probably we haven't discovered yet. That's an exciting area you might work in. I mean, topological is an area that Microsoft is touting, but is still a bit ambivalent, although Quantinuum recently announced that they had moved into that space and had a viable example of how that might work. But again, this is, places where you might work, right? doing interesting stuff. I want to share some screen grabs of real world career pages, and I have a URL. As a member of the QED, Quantum Economic Development Consortium Workforce TAC, we curate a Google Sheet with career pages for over 100 quantum-based companies. I'll dig out the URL and put it in the chat here. But in the meantime, this is how Google AI Quantum breaks out their job recs, right? Software, hardware, research, internships. That's how they organize it. Sandbox AQ, which is spun out of Google in March of this year, is focused on AI and quantum. That's the AQ, right? They have lots of different roles available, internships as well. They do a lot of work with the government. They're looking, for example, for a federal program manager. This is a random search on Google for quantum jobs in quantum. It pulled up stuff at this company QEI, which is near me here in Connecticut. A bunch of IBM opportunities. There's an assistant professor tenure track if you want to teach, back to the education model. Quantum at Intel, UConn executive director of Quantum CT at the university, a test engineer. Most of these have been posted within the last day, so they're not like a year old or whatever. This is ongoing opportunities for you to investigate. You can also do the similar kind of search on LinkedIn, but this is just random Google pulled up like literally dozens of these kinds of opportunities and wide ranging, right? QCware, one of my favorite companies, they're like a quantum software company, and they break their portfolio into these categories, right? Chemistry, ML, optimization, engineering, sales. And again, a bunch of roles. This is just a screen grab of kind of the current point in time view. Quantinuum, they're looking for a lead physicist for sure. Quantinuum, by the way, I don't know if you know this company, but just a sidebar qualifier. It's a company that was formed through the merger of Honeywell Quantum and a company called Cambridge Quantum, which is founded by a gentleman named Elias Khan. They were a quantum software company based in the UK. Honeywell is, a traditional kind of HVAC and fire prevention company, very industrial, very manufacturing focused. But the partnership with Cambridge Quantum led to this company called Quantinuum, and they're sort of the Apple, to me, of quantum. They have hardware, software services. They have a trapped ion computer, H1. They have software. They have services. They have consultants that go to the client. And the key about this company, to me, the differentiating factor is that Honeywell has these trusted relationships with clients, and they've been around like 100 years. So when Quantinuum calls, and it's maybe someone who had worked at what had been Honeywell, the client takes the call. It's a key point to keep in mind for all of you, right? Because they have the credibility as opposed to a young startup, a company that maybe doesn't really have a reputation yet, or clients, or demonstrated value prop. But a company like Honeywell, who's been servicing some big manufacturing facilities HVAC for like 20 years, when somebody calls and says, yeah, I've got this quantum thing I want to talk to you about, I can just see having worked in this kind of setting, I can see the person taking the call turning, going, yeah, Honeywell wants to talk to us about quantum. I don't know who they are, but it's Honeywell, so let's take a meeting. Okay, I'll see what it is. But so anyway, they're looking for a lead physicist, but they're also looking for a senior accounting specialist, right? Again, it's a business. They're running a business, and they need all the skills across a range of disciplines that are needed to run a business. This is my favorite, actually, Rigetti. So they're a superconducting quantum computing company, California, based in Palo Alto. They're looking for quantum engineering skills, right? But this is really unique. They have something called future open position. And what this is they don't know what they might hire you to do, but they want you to put your resume in their database because they might get a funding round or an executive hire who wants to start a new line of business or an order for 100,000 widgets or whatever, or a new business partner relationship. And they want to be able to have a bench, right? A set of people who understand the technology, at least at a meta level, they can then maybe train and orient and hire. So I would encourage all of you to go to this Rigetti career page, and just for practice, put your resume in there just to kind of log it with them, no matter where you are in your studies, and just a good exercise for you to kind of learn how to apply for a job, right? Okay, so I want to mention that I host the Quantum Tech Pod. Again, I published 58 episodes, interviews with various execs. I'm going to publish one next Wednesday, which was a conversation with the CEO of Alice and Bob. They're a French quantum computing company based in Paris, doing really interesting work with something called cat qubits. So that's coming out next Wednesday. Again, I host the office hours, as Tanner mentioned. We do it the last Thursday of the month. We did it today, actually, from 11 to 3. If you're interested, please sign up. You can send me a note. I'll send Tanner the information of where you can sign up online. We have a Google form that you can fill out and just put in, when you're available, and we'll assign you a mentor. What it is they're informal 30-minute conversations designed to have quantum information science students have a conversation with a mentor in the private sector, someone who's working in the quantum space, to talk about transitioning from academia, but also kind of what the life design, considerations are for someone interested in working in a science field. We have a woman from Sandia National Labs who joins us as a mentor and talks about that opportunity as well. How do you get to work in a national lab? So key takeaways. Quantum information science is a growing field. It's happening fast. There's lots of opportunity. Many opportunities exist. More are emerging as these companies morph and change and grow. Be ready to work in different settings and in different roles. Back to my evolving workforce chart. You may start somewhere and end up somewhere else. U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics says today's learners are going to have 8 to 10 jobs by the time they're 38. So certainly working in quantum, that's going to be true. And you may have more, you may have less. Standard mean deviation indicates that's the trending, but that's something to keep in mind. Again, when you get to working in quantum or in any tech field, right, in any business, really, keep learning and exploring. Don't stop. Learning is a lifelong endeavor. It's not something that happened in the past or that's happening now while you're in school. When you graduate, you're done. No, it goes on the rest of your life, the entire time. And network. I can't emphasize that enough. Add people to your network. Follow people that are doing interesting work in the field you're interested in. If it's computing or sensing, Clarkson sensors, if it's networking, if it's cryptography, find the people, the thought leaders that are doing the work in that space, and at least follow them on LinkedIn and offer to connect as well. There are very robust quantum conversations going on. People posting articles and blogs and links to white papers and research, and even job recs appear on LinkedIn. So network. And that's my talk. I'll see you in the quantum enabled future. Please connect with me on LinkedIn. Send me an email, and I'm happy to continue the conversation. So thanks very much for your time.
Thank you so much, Chris.